Before bears, before dogs, before many other carnivores had begun to experiment with being enormous and terrifying, there were bear dogs. Amphicyonids were the prototype for all the mammalian predatory threats that humans would one day face on their rampage across the planet. They were diverse, widespread, and successful apex predators for millions of years, and the largest we know of in North America was Amphicyon ingens. These were the giant bear dogs, and they dominated the large ruminants of North America for 5 million years. In this video, we are paying close tribute to some of the most brutal mammalian carnivores to have ever walked the land, and we'll talk about how Amphicyon ingens and the bear dogs in general disappeared as mysteriously as they appeared. And we'll finish up with two little teasers today. First, a newish bear dog discovery that might even have been more brutal than ingens, and then a nod to the only other group of carnivorans that could be considered this scary. Let's start with the family as a whole. Amphicyonids, or bear dogs, are a family of extinct carnivorans in the caniform suborder. Caniform translates roughly to dog-shaped, and since dogs are the most dog-shaped of all, they're in here too. But it also contains seals, bears, and mustelids, to name a few. Their position in the order has historically been a matter of debate, with early attempts to classify them placing them in the bear family Ursidae or the dog family Canidae. As you may have guessed, this is because they look a bit like both. This group differs from the feliform suborder of cat-shaped carnivores in a few ways, mostly in having non-retractable claws, longer faces, and generally more omnivorous diets. They also have more teeth. Oh, and they have a longer baculum too, which is essentially a penis bone, but for Amphicyonids at least, this is far down the list of bragging rights. Amphicyonids had large skulls, even for caniforms, and they were diverse in their range, reign, and species. Their origin is a bit of a mystery, as is their extinction, but they're thought to have originated as small semi-arboreal omnivores somewhere in North America. They would ultimately come to dominate Europe and Asia too, even having a pop at Africa, and diversified into both omnivorous and hypercarnivorous niches while doing so. For such an extinct branch of animals, there are a lot of described species. At least 5 subfamilies are commonly used, the smallest of which has around 13 species in it, and the largest over 50. Of course, all of this is subject to change, as a lot of them will be based on scant fossil evidence, but there's no doubt that Amphicyonids were diverse and rich for their time. They first appeared around 45 million years ago in Eocene North America, and by the early Miocene they were almost everywhere. The family name translates roughly to ambiguous dog, and this is a pretty good description since their similarities to multiple members of this caniform suborder makes them quite ambiguous. The majority vote now places them in their own family, Amphicyonidae, but there's still a debate around which of the modern clades they're closest to. They're commonly thought to be a sister taxon to bears, but it's beginning to look as though the Amphicyonidae family is older than both bears and dogs, and could therefore be basal to both. Of all these species, some were as light as 5 kilograms, and others became truly massive. And those, of course, are the most exciting, so let's take a look at the so-called giant bear dogs and what made them so scary. The history of the bear dogs can be described as a history of teeth. Early Amphicyonids had pretty standard teeth, but they branched out into different niches, and as they did this, their teeth evolved to fit the new purposes. Some developed dog-like teeth and thus had a diet similar to wolves. Others evolved bone-crushing teeth and probably lived like hyenas. And some, like our friend Amphicyon ingens, went with scissor-like carnassials for shearing through meat. These teeth resemble those found in modern mustelids, and we'll touch on why that's cool a little bit later, but the rest of the animal was far from slender. The largest of the bear dogs was also the most hypercarnivorous, and ingens was at the top of both of these lists. But this animal was also built like a bear. It had thick, sturdy limbs, and it would likely have hunted by ambushing and tackling prey. Oh, and by the way, it had the largest canines of any of the bear dogs known. Amphicyon would have been slower than a wolf, and certainly much slower than a cat, but it had the brutality of a bear, and possibly the speed too. Bears aren't known for running, but they can certainly move when they have to. And this could mean that Amphicyon was capable of chasing down prey, which it would have no trouble dispatching with its horrifying teeth and powerful forelimbs. Unlike wolves, it could rotate its forelimbs, similar in a sense to those of a bear or a cat, which further adds to the idea that Amphicyon would grapple large prey. In fact, some studies suggest that it had even more flexible arms than cats in this regard. But cats have highly advanced sensory adaptations on their faces, which allow them to place a precision bite into the throat, braincase, or spine of their prey, and Amphicyon didn't have any of this, so it perhaps relied on pure violence to end a hunt, tearing and crushing with its enormous jaws until there was nothing discernible left of its victim. So what were its victims? Well, there was plenty to choose from in Miocene North America. A pursuit strategy would have opened up the possibility of rhinoceratids, which were some of the most abundant mammals in North America at the time. African rhinoceratid fossils show damage from other species of Amphicyonid, which may or may not suggest that this was also the case in North America. In Europe, the intelligent-like Anthracotheres have shown similar woundings, but the North American diets for this giant bear dog are still not clear. It would be a rare breed of animal that could survive a beast this brutal latching onto it, as Amphicyon ingens was estimated to have weighed over half a ton, with a pronounced sagittal crest on the back of the skull, indicating that it could bite down very hard. From around 16 to 14 million years ago, this was the top bear dog in North America, at over 2.5 meters in length, and around 550 kilograms or more, and 1.2 meters at the shoulder. It was one of the biggest mammalian hypercarnivores of all time. But even this monster may have had some competition. Before we explore that, we just want to say thanks for watching this video and remind you to please give it a like if you think it's worthy. And if you're not already subscribed, please add your name to that list. We really appreciate your support. For a long time, Amphicyon ingens was considered the largest of the bear dogs. But there's another contender emerging from the fossil evidence coming from the east. Amphicyon giganteus is significant in a couple of ways. First, it might have been even more brutal than ingens, at an upward estimate of 750 kilograms. And secondly, it was one of the earliest members to represent the gradual extinction of the family, something which appears to have happened in a long global wave from around 16 million years to perhaps as recently as 7 million years ago. More modern carnivores would take over, but whether this was the cause or the symptom of the bear dog extinction remains to be seen. What is interesting about their demise is that it didn't happen quickly. By the time Amphicyon giganteus was disappearing, Amphicyon ingens was still on its rise to the top on the other side of the planet, and bear dogs would continue their reign in different regions of the planet for millions of years, but they would ultimately be snuffed out entirely, with no species of their family surviving into the modern day. And nobody's quite sure why. By around 10 million years ago, the giant bear dogs were almost extinct worldwide. By 5 million years ago, the last of them perished. But there's a group of carnivorans in the same suborder that could be considered the only such predators to have outmatched them, and they're still around. Mustelids are an often overlooked group of animals on account of them being relatively small. Mustelids are commonly recognized from the skunks and otters, but the family contains some of the most fearsome killers you'll ever find. The smallest of them is only 100 grams, but it can bring down prey significantly heavier, and we all know about the honey badger. But 20 million years ago, there was a colossal jaguar-sized example that brought the honey badger attitude to the big leagues. This was Megalictis ferox, and if you'd like to know more about how epic and underappreciated the mustelids were, and still are, check out our video on that guy next. As for this one, thanks again for watching. It's been really fun, so see you next time.